Hello and welcome to another episode of Community Conversations, the podcast for those who have a heart for helping others. In this podcast, we cover the topic of kinship care and explore the questions you might ask yourself if you're thinking about caring for others or advising others. Now to unpack the conversation with our special guests, it's over to you, Pietro.
And welcome today. I'd like to welcome Tina Anderson, who's the Hunter Region Coordinator for Mirabel Foundation, and Melinda Smith, who's a grandparent and also a carer. I'd like to start off by just having a quick chat with you, Melinda. Melinda, you've been through quite a journey with your own daughter. Can you share some of the journey with us and how you come to be raising your own grandson?
Okay, so my daughter was a drug addict. She had a few children and they were all removed from her care. I have the last child that she had. He's now 8. I've had him since he was a baby. It's been a wild journey. It's been a roller coaster journey, and guess what? It still continues today. It just never goes away.
Now, you've got other children. How many children do you have, and how have they responded to those challenges that you mentioned about raising Chase? You're a family, so it's not like all this has happened without them.
Yeah, okay. So I have 5 children altogether. Being 4 of them have left home and have their own children or off married and what so. But I've got a 14-year-old at home still. So he was 6 when Chase came into our care. But it has been difficult for the older children as well. My middle children don't have children, but my eldest daughter does. And it impacts her that I'm not available for her like a normal grandmother as well.
Melinda, you were introduced to Mirabel through a support group, as I understand it. How do people typically find out about these support groups and what's available, and what sort of services are available to you as a grandparent from these support groups as a kinship carer?
So I was introduced to Mirabel through a wonderful woman that worked with Mirabel for a while. She's now retired. There's many services. There's lots of things that they offer to us, whether it's educational needs, or they're just at the other end of the line if we want to call them, if we need to talk to anybody. There's plenty of stuff like court supports, letting people know, helping them with things with Centrelink and fax and all different sorts of things. There's just a huge range of things. What's been the area that's been particularly helpful for you? For me, it's been educational support, helping with things that I've needed for my grandson. But there are a lot of other things. They have mentors, they have Christmas parties, great Christmas parties. There's big days out, just picnics throughout the year for grandparents and their grandchildren.
Would you mind telling us what's a big day out? I know what a big day out might be for me, you know. Okay. But what's a big day out for you and for Chase?
Okay, so we haven't managed to get there to one yet because my grandson hasn't been old enough, but he is this year. So Luna Park, where they take the children, they have volunteers and they take the children into Luna Park while the grandparents get a little bit of pampering and have a little bit of a cruise around Sydney Harbour and things like that. And there's a Wet and Wild in Sydney. I don't know what it's called, but
I think it's Wet and Wild. Yeah.
Wet and Wild? Okay.
It's Raging Waters.
Oh, Raging Waters.
Raging Waters.
We're going to bring you now into the mix, Tina.
Sure.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty about Mirabel, tell us the backstory about how and why Mirabel got started and what does the name actually mean?
Yep, so Mirabel was founded 21 years ago now by our CEO, Jane Rowe. Jane was a drug and alcohol counsellor down in Melbourne, and it was during the heroin epidemic down there where there was a lot of overdoses. During that time, Jane was attending a lot of funerals for the clients that she was working for, and she was seeing these children at the funerals, and she wondered what happens to the children. Where do they go? Who looks after them? Who cares for them? And from that, Mirabel was born. So it was born around her kitchen table. She identified that there was a need in the community and decided to form Mirabel.
That sounds wonderful. So what's your role? How many families does Mirabel support, perhaps in the wider Hunter and Central Coast region? And let's just talk about that first if we could.
So my role is the Hunter Region Coordinator. We also have a family support and youth support worker up in Newcastle. Around the Hunter and Central Coast, we're supporting 900 children. Across both states, New South Wales and Victoria, we're supporting over 1,800 children.
That's quite a few children. So what's the criteria for people to receive support from you?
It's pretty easy. People who are caring for kin, so whether it's a grandparent, an auntie or uncle, a cousin, a sister, a brother, they just give us a call for a chat. So give us a call, we'll see that they fit our criteria, and that criteria is that they are in kinship care due to illicit drug use. And then we'll do an intake, and then we can start supporting them from there on in.
You mentioned, was it 900? Or you mentioned 900 here in the Central Coast?
Yeah, roughly around 900 children.
How many people would you speak to on any given day?
Well, today, for example, I would have spoken to around 25, 30 carers.
That's a lot of people.
And a couple of young people as well.
Own.
Yeah.
That's a big job.
Yeah, that's a lot of phone time.
So, Tina, I understand that Mirabel is the only kinship organisation in Australia to support carers. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, Pietro. We're the only organisation that provides what we do for kinship families, in terms of support and helping out financially and providing the young people and children with a sense of purpose and belonging.
Melinda shared about how she found out about Mirabel. But could you tell us the other ways that people could come to you and maybe some of the services that you've actually offered? I know you mentioned briefly, but maybe if you can expand on some of the more specific services that are offered.
Yeah, sure. So we offer advocacy. So we have a lot of carers who might be with the department, so FACS or DCJ. We can offer advocacy for them if they're sort of having trouble navigating the system. We also offer informal counselling over the phone. We run support groups, so therapeutic support groups for our young people. We run camps. We run big days out, as Melinda touched on. We are running regional support groups online for our families that are a little bit isolated out there. Yeah, we just try to make all the children within Mirabel have a great childhood.
That's fantastic. So community services organisations, obviously referrals come from wherever children are involved?
Absolutely.
Tell me something, what people like Melinda, what do you think is their greatest need for this type of support? Is it isolation? Is it the fact that they're disconnected? Is it lack of resources? What do you think of the...
Sometimes it's just needing someone to talk to, someone to debrief. They might be feeling that they're getting the runaround from other services and they're not sure what to do and how to navigate things.
I'd like to find out what happens on a typical day for you. Like how many phone calls do you get? You've got a whole lot of people that you've got to look after. It's a vast region. Explain to us what a typical day might be like.
Yes, I'll explain today. Today started at 8:30 for me. I went out to collect some hampers for some of our families for them to come to the office and collect. And then the phone starts ringing. So I did an initial intake with a new carer and they generally take about 90 minutes to do. This was a very complex family, so it took a very long time. Myself and the youth support worker were in today, so we were fielding calls from carers coming to collect the hampers. A couple of crisis calls were in there that the carers just needed a bit of a debrief. And then we had some of our young people come into the office with their carer, so we had to catch up with them. So days are busy. It's very busy, all in the Hunter as well as Melbourne. We're very, very busy.
So have you just described a typical day then?
That's pretty much a typical day, yeah.
So how many phone calls did you get today?
So I would have had about 25 to 30 phone calls.
30 phone calls. That's a massive amount of work, isn't it?
It is.
So obviously the need is great.
The need is extremely great up here. We around this region, we have a lot of families doing it tough, and we have a high percentage of drug use within the region. And for that reason, you know, we can have carers who are having issues with their children, custody issues or issues with the children coming saying, I want my children back. And so on any given day, every day looks different. but they are very busy days.
Just out of interest, can people volunteer and support the Mirabelle Foundation in some particular way? What can they do?
Absolutely, yeah. We rely on volunteers. We've got a little pool of volunteers up in the Hunter now who they can come and volunteer on our therapeutic girls groups with us. We're trying to get a boys group started, so we need some male volunteers to come on board and help us out with that one. We have family fun days where we might go to treetops. We might have an event at our office space at the Hunter Life Education Building. We need volunteers for those days.
What are some of the criteria for volunteering?
We have a volunteer intake, so it's a bit of a training session. We just need people who have got a clear working with children's check. We do a police check on that person as well, and then we do a training session with them.
What about age? Does it matter how old they are?
No, age doesn't matter at all. So some of our current volunteers we've got who are doing university, so they're 18, 19, and then we've got volunteers that come who are 60.
That's fantastic. So obviously the volunteers listening, or people listening today, we'll give them some details later on how they can contact the Mirabelle Foundation and get in touch with you
Absolutely.
or your colleagues.
We would love to hear from them.
No problems at all. Melinda, can you tell us about some of the support that you've received, and who's in some of these support groups that you've talked about before? What do they do and how helpful are they? So the support groups with other carers like yourself.
Well, the support groups that I'm in are run by the Samaritans. They're a bit quiet at the moment because of COVID, but they'll be back on soon. So who attends the support groups mainly at the moment are grandparents raising their grandchildren. It is open to all kinship care. We get a couple of younger ones or aunts or uncles or what come in and they come to learn what we know, and we offer that over. The first thing I always say to someone new into a support group is, have you been in contact with Mirabelle? Are you able to join Mirabelle? Is it drugs that you brought these children to you or whatever? And then we just go through the whole process. Contact Mirabelle, contact your grandparent support person at Centrelink and all that. So we are there just offering out all the knowledge we possibly can to help grandparents or kinship carers that are coming in. Most carers that come in are looking for all that sort of advice and for friendships for their kids as well, because we like to let them know that they're not alone, that we're all there, we're all in the same sort of boat, and they don't need to do the journey on their own.
I like what you said about information, because I think there's there's some quote that I've heard somewhere where information is knowledge and knowledge is power. So to provide that information to people who maybe for the first time they may have contacted Mirabelle today, one of those 25 people, and then you're providing that information, which saves a lot of time and a lot of heartache and a lot of headache.
Especially if they're just coming into it, if they're going through the process of getting their children. They may not have them yet, but if they come along to a group, and I know a family that did this, they came along while they were in court and they learnt so much. They were ready to go the day the children came into their care. They knew exactly what they were doing.
We talked about COVID-19. I want to ask a question, Tina. From a mental health perspective, COVID-19 has been very challenging for everybody, but how has it impacted on the support groups that might be meeting here, and some of the isolation that people might feel?
Yeah, look, it's really impacted on Mirabelle in terms of our funding, because we can't run our major fundraisers throughout the year, but also it's impacted on us in a positive way is that we've had to adapt. So we're now running our girls' therapeutic groups online via Zoom. It impacts on the carers being at home with children when they'd normally be at school. So there's been some stress that we've had calls coming through saying, I just need to talk to someone. These kids are home. I don't know how to use a computer. I don't know how to homeschool. It's been a lot of pressure for a lot of people, but we've been there to support them through that. And we're, as we always say, we're just at the end of the phone.
Yeah, I mean, COVID-19 has been challenging for a lot of organisations regarding fundraising right across the globe. How is actually Mirabelle funded? I mean, who actually provides the finances so that the children can go on the big day outs and the raging waters, and also and also look after the running of the operation as such?
Yeah, so we're funded by generous people who donate to us. So we have very limited government funding in Victoria only. New South Wales is solely dependent on donors. So we run a couple of big functions per year which had to be cancelled this year. We run a ladies' lunch in Sydney that brings in quite a bit of money. We run other events throughout the year, and from that's how we provide for our families.
We understand that in Victoria there's funding available. However, it's limited here in New South Wales and the Hunter region. And so we're just putting a call out to those that are listening here today, some generous donors, if they would have the capacity to provide a complete tax-deductible donation to the Mirabelle Foundation. We're going to provide some details about that for individuals and businesses to get involved at the end of our podcast. So we'll have information available for you. So Melinda, tell us about the services you receive from Mirabelle and the difference that it's made to you and to your grandson Chase.
There's been some tough times, and I've contacted Mirabel and needed help with education services. So they've stepped up, and I've sort of gone out and brought school shoes and school clothing, things that he needs, and then they've just refunded me that money. They have helped with sports. When Chase was doing temping bowling, they helped pay for that for me for the term, and guitar lessons. It's been a real big help. And other carers I know, they've paid for all like football, soccer, all those sort of different things. So
which is a massive help, isn't it?
It is. It's huge. Otherwise, these kids probably wouldn't be doing it.
Because sometimes
it's all about normal life for our kids.
Because sometimes these expenses come, in the new year. We've just had Christmas and all those, we're sort of our credit cards to the max.
Well, that's right, because, you got Christmas, then they're back to school, and straight away we're into sport, and it's really, really tough. So if you're on a pension alone, you might be a single grandparent, it's really, really tough.
Melinda, you mentioned earlier that there are lots of grandparents in the support groups. Are grandparents typically the ones who come to the rescue with the Kinship Care?
Well, from my knowledge, yes, it is. It's usually the grandparents that take over. But I've met a couple of kinship carers, like aunts or sisters that have taken on their brothers and things like that. Yeah.
So tell me, there's probably people listening to our podcast, I'm sure there are. What advice would you give to anyone who's at the very beginning of this kinship care journey?
Get into a support group, meet some new people, and learn what's out there. Learn what you're entitled to.
So like Google support groups, kinship care kind of things.
Yeah, well, get onto Mirabel, because you'll know exactly, they'll send you down the right path.
So Tina, some of the families that you meet would be at different stages of the kinship care journey. Some are just at the beginning, and others perhaps years into it. What are some of the similarities that you see in families?
Our Mirabelle families are very unique, but the similarities that they all share is grief. So they're grandparents or aunties or uncles that are grieving for what their future would have been. They're grieving for children that they've lost to drugs, and they're also having to reparent at an age when they should be retiring, some of them. So it's a journey that's very conflicted for a lot of our carers, and Mirabelle wants to ease the burden of what they're experiencing during this confliction and help them through the process.
So Tina, what more needs to be done as a community sector? Like, I'm part of the community as well, and I'm a guy, and what do you think we can do as a community sector to be more involved in supporting families just like Melinda that are in and obviously grandkids or children that are in kinship care?
You can spread the word about Mirabelle as a big start. We need funding. We're a children's charity. We're not government funded, so we need someone to back us and to give the children that we work with a childhood that they deserve. We also need volunteers, especially male volunteers that can work in therapeutic boys groups with us, volunteers that can come on our family days or our big days out that we hold, just positive people to make a difference in a young person's life who may, that young person might be living with a single grandmother and they don't have a lot of exposure to positive male mentors. So we need people on board for that reason.
I'm a guy, so how much time would I need to commit to helping, Mirabelle and these young guys?
The therapeutic boys groups we'd run once a month. If we had a number of volunteers, we could run them twice a month. And then our events we run throughout the year. So it's not a huge commitment, but it's just a commitment to changing a young person's life.
Do you mind telling me a bit about this therapeutic boys group? What's involved? What's it about?
Sure. So I ran a therapeutic boys group last year, and it was called the Art of Manliness. I ran it with a worker from the Samaritans. And we had 8 young people in this group, and it was exploring masculinity. So what does it mean to be a young guy in today's society? What are your values? What's okay? How do you de-escalate situations? So rather than fighting, how do you bring such heightened situations down? Who do you want to be when you're older? Who do you aspire to be? It's really about challenging today's stereotypical male and showing them that there's another way to be. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be, you can feel hurt and you can feel emotions, but you can also talk about those emotions. And you can also, within this group, it's a safe space for you to be who you want to be.
So how many young men in the group?
At the moment, we're only running girls' therapeutic groups because we don't have enough male mentors around to run the group.
So what we're really we're calling out to guys right now, maybe they're tradespeople, they could be retired, they were once maybe in scouts or boys groups or whatever, they might be senior executives in a bank. They just want to give one or 2 hours a month, is that right?
Yeah, so we run a 2-hour session once a month is what we were doing last year. But if we were to do it twice a month, it would be 4 hours a month.
Yeah, I think it's great because we're all part of the village, aren't we? We're all trying to raise these children together. So I think it's a great idea, great opportunity for men in particular, like you're saying, to be able to give a little bit back and build into the lives of young men like, your grandson Chase, and develop life skills. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and it shapes that young person's life.
Absolutely, because every child deserves a childhood.
Absolutely.
So Melinda, can you tell us a bit more about the support groups and what you personally get out of it yourself?
The support groups that I go to, when I first started, I was feeling really, really isolated. I'd lost a lot of friends when Chase came into my life, and I just felt like I was alone. And I went along to the group there at Charlestown, and I was just blown away by the amount of people that were sitting around this table, and they all briefly told me their story. And when I walked out of there, I just thought, wow, there's so many people just like me. Over the years, because I've been going there now for at least 7 years, I've formed fantastic friendships. I don't know where I'd be today without them. We do outings together all the time. We go out for coffee, we go out for dinner, we holiday together, we've done cruises, we've done camps, all sorts of different things, and our kids all come together. And they know they're not alone as well. They go to school and everyone's got a mum and dad, and they're the little kids that really don't have a mum and dad. But when they come with us and they see that there's so many other kids in the same boat, they just feel more accepted in amongst all that. So I just got so much in the social side of things from the group, as well as learning so many different things about people and their lives and their stories, and where they can go, where we can go to help one another.
I've actually really enjoyed speaking to both of you today. It's been really fascinating. I've learned so much about the incredible work you do. You both have a heart and a passion for helping other people, which is what Community Conversations is all about. So I'd like to thank you, Tina Anderson from Mirabelle Foundation, for being a special guest here today, and to you as well, Melinda Smith, for your incredible work that you're doing with raising your grandson, and also your passion for support workers. If you're a business person or an individual and you'd like to make a contribution, a financial contribution, or possibly discuss an opportunity, you could be a guy out there, maybe you want to be involved as a volunteer, they can Google Mirabelle Foundation, or they can go to their social pages, or you can actually ring Tina on 0240 232347, or you can actually ring the head office and speak to Nicole Patton, and the number there is 03 9527 9422. Now, topics like kinship care, they can raise up a lot of emotions, and if you need to talk through some of the things that we've discussed today, I'd like to encourage you to reach out to Lifeline. Another phone number is 131114. And again, I'd like to thank Michael Smith, our producer and editor, and I'm your host. Pietro Di Girolamo. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Community Conversations.